Chapter 18. A Special Performance. Prodded every few seconds, Pete and Ricky were taken to Professor Marr's wagon and made to sit on a low bunk. The man who'd been holding Ricky glared at the professor. "You sure got us in a fine jam," he said. "What are we going to do now?" "There's only one thing to do, Nero. Scram out of here fast." "You're right. Let's start packing." Pete and Ricky looked at each other. What if the men should escape before Mr. Hollister could come with the police? The older boy was determined to find out what he could, in case the men should get away. Looking at the professor, he said, "There's no use trying to run off, Mr. Fred Smith." Nero spun around. "Fred Smith? Why do you know—" "We know all about you," Ricky said. "You stole Champion Fern Lake Enchantment from the Shoreham Dog Show, and you hurt our Zip when he chased you. You're going to get punished for being so mean." The men laughed harshly. "We won't be caught," said Professor Mars, who was stuffing shirts into an old suitcase. "We'll lock these kids in here, Nero, and get out fast." The boys' hearts thumped wildly. If they could only stop these dog nappers. Pete went on. "You went snooping around Sunshine Circus and stole Nappy. And later, when you found out there were a couple of other trick poodles at our motel, you took them too. Mimi and Fifi, I mean." Professor Mars was very nervous. Yes, we did all that," he admitted. "We needed dogs for our act, and we didn't have time to train new ones." "But Nappy got away for a while," Ricky said. "Yeah, that dog was smart. He got out of our car near Seashell Beach and almost found his way to Circus Island, but we caught him again." By this time, the two men had finished packing their bags. Mars pointed a finger at the two boys and warned, "Now stay where you are. We're going to lock this door from the outside. Not a word out of you for at least half an hour." The two men stepped out of the wagon. But before they had a chance to lock the door, Pete said, "Come on, Rick." The boys flung themselves at the door. Crash! It swung open, knocking both men to the ground. "Why didn't you tie those kids up?" Nero shouted, jumping up. "I'll do it now," Mars answered. But before he had time to rise, Pete was astride the man's back. Ricky took a swing at Nero. "I'll get you kids for this," Nero shouted. As the man raised his arm to hit the boy, another voice shouted, "You'll do nothing of the kind." With this, a fist shot out and hit Nero on the point of the chin. The fellow's knees sagged and he sprawled onto the dusty ground. "Dad!" Pete shouted, and added admiringly, "What a wallop!" "Looks as if we got here just in time," Mr. Hollister said, smiling. As he spoke, two policemen hurried up, followed by Mrs. Hollister and the three girls. The officers took charge of Professor Mars and Nero, who would not talk. But Pete said they admitted everything to Ricky and me. "Fine," said one of the officers. By this time, other circus people had crowded around, and when the Hollisters told them of the poodle thefts, they cried out angrily. "We've felt all along there was something phony about these fellows," one of the aerialists said. "And we feel certain Wizard isn't being run on the level. That man Toto at Sunshine is in partnership with the owner here. Toto's been getting everybody to leave Peppo by promising them more money at Wizard. But we haven't been paid a cent yet." "That's right," said another. "If Peppo'd take me back, I'd go in a minute." "Oh, he will," Pam spoke up. "Peppo wants you all." "Then let's go," said the sword swallower, and the others cried yes. The Hollisters were very happy about the outcome, and could hardly wait to get back to Treasure Cove with the good news. As the prisoners were led away, the children obtained leashes for the 4 poodles, and took the dogs to the Hollisters' car. When they rode off, several performers shouted, "Hooray for the Hollisters!" The children waved back. Upon reaching town, the family had breakfast, and the restaurant owner gave the animals food too. When the Hollisters came outside, they saw a big bus parked behind their station wagon. In it were all the circus people who had deserted Peppo. "We're going back with you," one said. "Swell," Pete replied. It was a happy ride back to Circus Island. Reaching it, the children stopped for just a moment at the motel to leave Champion in Pam's room and to return Fifi and Mimi to the Blakes. The couple were overjoyed. Then the Hollisters leading the way, everyone trooped across the causeway. The gate man's mouth fell open when he saw his former friends. "Peppo! Peppo, come here quick!" he shouted. As Peppo, Kit, and Rita ran from their houseboat, Pam, who was holding Nappy, let him go. The dog raced to his owner and excitedly put his forepaws against the clown's chest. At the same time, the sword swallower announced, "We're back to stay, Peppo." The clown was so overcome with joy that for a time he could not speak. Rita and Kit, meantime, hugged the Hollister children and jumped up and down with delight. Finally, their father welcomed the circus performers and asked them to take their old quarters. Then he shook the Hollisters' hands. "I'll never be able to thank you enough for all you've done," he said. "But please come back to Circus Island this evening. We'll have a celebration, and I mean a real celebration." We will," the children promised. When the Hollisters returned to the island at 8 o'clock, they were greeted by the blaring of bugles. The circus band struck up a jolly tune, and Peppo greeted them in costume, his face painted in a big smile. Underneath the paint, the children could see that he was wearing a real smile as well. "Welcome, welcome, my friends," he said. "Tonight we are previewing this year's Sunshine Circus, just for you." The Hollisters were led to the big top, where other clowns capered about, tumblers tumbled, and aerialists swung high above them on their trapezes. "The best seats in the house for the folks from Shoreham," Kit grinned as he took them to the front row. Before the show began, Peppo ran up and stood in front of his guests. "Happy Hollisters," he said. "I can never thank you enough for all you've done for me and my children. Now I shall not have to sell my houseboat. But I have found a very good one for your customer, Mr. Hollister." "Splendid," said the children's father. "Although I could never repay your kindness," Peppo went on, "there's one thing I can promise." "What's that?" Ricky asked expectantly. "This circus will be in Shoreham the end of June," Peppo said. "You and all your friends are invited to see our show free." "Hooray!" the children shouted. Just then the trumpets sounded again. The ringmaster strode to the center ring, and the big show, especially for the happy Hollisters, began.